Okay, I have not filmed a video in like 3 or 4 months at this point. So this is just going to be me rambling about some stuff I've been thinking about and try to get something out, get back in the routine. For lack of a better word, I'm going to call the topic of this video systems. Again, this term is just so we have something to refer back to, some word to use within this video. It's not a great term, and I hope someone can offer up something better, an alternative. So let's go through a short list of traits that systems have. First, they have some kind of emergent property. So once you set a system up, it kind of has a basic rule set that it abides by. You could call this a game, maybe. I don't know, a sandbox, a game space, I'm not quite sure. But regardless of what you call it, there are certain qualities that pop up that were not in the original rule set that kind of show up out of nowhere. And I guess implicit in this is a second quality that we can call rules. It can be very open-ended and minimal structure, but there's still some structure that you have to stay within the bounds of. And then there's some kind of third quality, which I really don't have a label for at all. It's just some level of complication that this system produces, that the emergent results within the system kind of produces. And once you have that, you know it's linked to the original system, but it seems so odd, so strange that you don't really know, it doesn't feel directly related. You don't know how exactly you got to that point. So I think the best thing we could do now is kind of jump into it, give an example and kind of run through it and see how that works. And importantly, the properties 1 and 3 are really what I'm interested in and what I'm trying to highlight, and really why the idea of this being a system, because this is not an atypical definition for system, roughly speaking, but really it's the characteristic qualities, the emergent properties that come from a system that I'm trying to talk about here. So it's not the system itself, it's really the things that get produced by a system, and that'll become clearer as we go on. Okay, so I've been getting really into clouds recently because they're one of these systems that has really interesting and nuanced emergent properties, but it's not disparate enough that you can't categorize them, right? You can categorize clouds. It's not that difficult. So the reason that I find this so interesting is because there is a set of rules underlying every single cloud, and you can readily understand those rules and understand the cloud as a result of those rules. Like, to the best of my knowledge from like a couple of YouTube videos, hot air rises and then it continues to rise, and the dew point determines at what point in the atmosphere water will start to condense into a cloud, and then within the cloud, the hot air continues to rise, and then when the air no longer has water that needs to condense, it stops the cloud. So that's why the cloud is this tall in particular, why it starts there and ends there. Within just this simple example of a cloud, there are properties of weather that have to be in place. These are rules. These are the rules that have to be in place. The rules of hot air tending to rise, the chemical properties of water vapor being able to be dissolved in air, all of these things that have to go right for this to be produced. And there's no rhyme or reason for any of these things to be the case. There's no need, strictly speaking, for water to be able to exist in the state that it does, that's able to produce a cloud as a byproduct. But there's an infinite number of steps along that chain that you can walk backwards and figure out how the end result was produced. You can walk backwards and, in this case, figure out the rules that have led to the emergent properties. And I find that very neat. And on a deeper level, the bonds that occur within the water molecule itself, there's no strict necessity for that to occur. There's no need for that to exist cosmically. It's just a freak accident. It's a rule that has come about to come into play, and from that rule, certain things have occurred, ultimately ending up in this kind of beautiful cloud formation. And taking a look at things from a causal point of view, I think, is a really beautiful perspective to have. So really, the premise of this video is to go through a couple of examples of things and look at it with a causal point of view and try to express to you how much beauty I think are in some of these systems. Okay, so the next example is a library. I think this is another pretty straightforward, solid example of what I'm trying to key into here. You take humanity, each human of which is already kind of an infinitely complex system in its own right, and you take all of these people and you shove them into specific social situations, into specific societies. You do this on a long enough timeline for writing to be formed, for things to be recorded in a systematized way, and for this information to be distributed on a wide enough scale to have relatively easy access to an almost unlimited amount of information. Really, I can go into my school's library and there is going to be a book on anything. Sometimes I'll walk through just the chemistry section of the library, and it's so hyper-specific and nuanced topics of books that are very thick. They're dense and thick books on the nichest of niche topics, and I find that really beautiful, really kind of amazing when you think about how large a library is. You can have multiple floors that you have effectively filled with just pure information. Each book in its own right is infinitely complex, but also internally consistent, which is a key motive. It was clearly motivated by something. The person who wrote each book was motivated in their own way, had their own mental state that produced the writing that you can now go and access within a book. And again, this is just a massive scale, but it is crazy when you think about how much information is held within a single building. I think these examples are a little more straightforward, but really the next couple will be the ones that I'm more interested in, that hit me more personally. The next system that I'd like to highlight is the computer and the internet. I think this is really remarkable. It's silly to say out loud that the internet is remarkable because, of course, duh, it's obvious. Computers are amazing. They're a wonder of technology, of human creation. But really, it is tremendous that we have used some small subset of our human knowledge to construct a computer that's capable of communicating vast areas across the globe to other computers in such a way that can send information almost instantaneously. And along with that, again, a silly thing to say, but microchips, microprocessors, amazing. Circuit boards, crazy that we can do that. We have effectively inscribed small runes on a piece of silicon so that everyone can have kind of unlimited access to the information that was already vast. And not just that information, but also the information that doesn't even matter enough to write down in traditional books, that matters so little that you just need to text your friend that you'll be over in 5 minutes. We can do that because we have computers, because we've gone through all of those minutiae, all those tiny little steps to get us here. We take it for granted, but it's a hugely complex piece of hardware, and the pieces of software are also incredibly complex. And the steps that were used to produce this thing are also incredibly complex. But now we exist in the world in such a way where most of us are online a number of hours per day, where this has become fully integrated with our lives. And that in its own right has become a system that is producing novel outcomes that were not previously produced socially within history. People spending their time on the internet instead of going to their local communities, whatever that means. We don't have that really at all anymore. People are now online. We are driven by online culture. We're creating online culture. We're product of the computer in this strange way where we have merged with it. We are no longer fully human in our own right. We are now part machine because our own psyches, our own social organizations, all of these more malleable parts of humanity have already been shaped in such a massive way by the technology that we have created. And it's easy to get bogged down in that statement and say, oh, isn't that terrible? Isn't that scary? Humans have never lived like this before. We weren't meant to spend hours a day looking at screens. But I really don't care about that at all. I think it's beautiful in its own right. And I think it's amazing what we have done. If we're capable of putting aside the implications or potential implications or the guesswork that we're doing around what this impact will be to individual people, then it starts to become clear that humans are not the only creatures really at this point. Humans, as long as you're taking a materialistic point of view, which I am, are also just hugely complex biological processors in a certain way. And if we take a step outside of our own perspective for a moment and look at computers or even clouds or chemicals or whatever, these are all also very intricate processes with their own rules and their own emergent properties. And there's something fascinating about that, deeply, deeply fascinating. As long as you're not going to invoke the soul or some kind of metaphysical answer, we're not really different at all from these other processes, from these other structures, from these other systems. The only thing separating us from computers at this moment is that we were able to create the computers. We were able to be part of a causal chain that resulted in this as an outcome. And interestingly, humans have a rule set for sure. They have a spinal cord and are limited by their body and cannot send themselves over the internet. They can't transmute. They can't change places in space without physically moving from one place to another continuously. But compared to other things, compared to clouds, for example, those rule sets are pretty broad. And from that, we're able to stretch that a lot further. We're able to do a lot more with that. We're able to create these things. We're able to shape the world in such a way that new processes, new emergent behaviors form. We can now create systems. And really, we're very unique in that regard. Animals can use tools to a certain extent. They can do things, but not in the same way that we can. You don't see mice building a house. You don't see them building a city. You don't see them creating the wheel. And we're very unique in that regard. And I think that's one of the best ways to describe intelligence, is the ability to create these new systems, the ability to take your own rule set and push them to the greatest possible extent that now create kind of subsets that are no longer really linked to you, that have their own emergent properties, that have their own behavior in their own right. And if you've been watching this channel for any length of time and hear me mention intelligence, I'm sure you know where I'm going. I'm sure you know what my next step here is. Would have used a blue marker for the ocean, but it's dead, so that's the Earth. We've gotten to a point with computers so quickly that we can now create some semblance of intelligent system. And that's wild. That's crazy. To take a step back from what's currently occurring, whatever your opinions on the implications of AI are, it's crazy that we have gotten to the point where we've been able to manipulate pieces of the Earth in such a way that have given rise to systems that can produce animated visuals from a few words that you type into a computer. You type those in, it's trained on a massive wealth of information. Frankly, there should be another line from here going to this, from effectively all of this information now, no longer just a small subset really. It's all of the information that we have, it has trained on in some way. And you can now type to this thing and it will give you back something that did not exist previously. It's not a collage machine. It's not like splicing images together. It's really something that has not existed before. And I use video or image generation because I think that's the clearest example. I think that's the most forceful example of like tralalero tralala would never have existed if it were not for AI, if it were not for this massive manipulation that we have been able to aid in to the production of this thing, to the production of this system that now has its own emergent properties. If you're still with me, this is excellent. I'm very glad, because this next step that we're going to take is where I find I lose the most number of people. So from AI, I think even if you're an AI skeptic, I'm making this video presuming the person watching this is an AI skeptic. I hope at this point that I have presented a solid enough case that is able to show you that this is a wonderful creation, at least, that it's causally complicated and has unique emergent properties that come from other systems, all of which have their own emergent properties. This is Bombardino Crocodilo, by the way. I felt the need to include one of them here as an emergent property of AI. Okay, anyways. Okay, so this is the point in my argument where I've lost the most people. To do all of this, we need some underlying system that's capable of handling the intricacies, right? There's a lot of rules at play. There's a lot of rules that are spontaneously popping up. There's a lot of emergent properties from those rules that are also popping up and really affecting everything else in this very complicated web in an intricate manner, right? And that is where an axiomatic comes in. That's why we have money, right? We have taken all of this complexity and created an abstract signifier where we're now able to quantify all of this. We're able to quantify any individual step in any of these processes. We're able to quantify the impact, positive or negative, on the axiomatic itself of any of the emergent properties of any of these behaviors. It's a wildly complex thing, and you need kind of everything to fall under this single axiomatic to make any of it work. You can't compare disparate things if it's not combined under the same kind of mega structure. And now that everything is under a single thing, we can kind of do whatever we want. We can compare different things. We can take very disparate things and compare the economic weight of the two. However, anything that you do now has to benefit the building of the roof that we're under. We're under this very specific roof, and as long as what you're doing, as long as your action benefits the building itself, then feel free to do it. And you can do it in the most straightforward way that we have ever come up with. For all intents and purposes, any logistical question that you could possibly have has been solved by economics. You can take pears that grow in one area of the earth, ship it to the other side of the earth, and then ship it back to a final location where it's being sold. And we know that logistically that is the cheapest way to do it. And even though we're using this kind of abstract signifier, it's not just a signifier, or rather anything that you would care about within a logistical process also falls under the signifier. But while that is the case, while logistics is effectively solved, there's also all kinds of negative outcomes, you could say, of taking from one part of the earth and using human labor to process raw materials into a final good that gets shipped back to a different part of the earth, and then using the money that you have made off of that product to fund, let's say AI in this instance, because it's on the board. There's a line being drawn on this board. So this is wildly emergent behavior, right? And can only be done under this certain set of rules. If you didn't have this set of rules, then you would need some other rule set to get any of this done, much less all of this done. And really, the point of this section of the video is to say, this is incredibly impressive, right? At least give me that. This is wildly impressive. Whatever you feel about capitalism, it is wildly impressive that we've constructed a rule set to be able to get all of this done. If we're using some kind of definition for intelligence that favors emergent behavior, that favors the ability to kind of construct new rule sets that would not have been constructed otherwise and be produced, then I think capitalism is a highly intelligent system in its own right. In the same way that we say human beings are living things, I think capitalism is an intelligent system. Human beings are cells and organs and the systems that they're in, the societies that they're in, the other people that they spend time around. And all of these factors create what we call a singular human being. And we like to draw the line there. We like to draw it at a unit, at an individual, because that's what each one of us is. We don't interact as cells, as organs, as one component within a larger social structure. We have our own lives. We don't interact in that way. And that's the reason that we don't think of capitalism or any of these systems as singular units in their own right. But really, why is that? What stops capitalism from being an intelligent system? What stops AI from being intelligent in its own right? I think it's largely prejudice. I think it's largely the understanding that we operate as individuals and we have a human-centered perspective of the world because of that. And this video is not to say anything good necessarily about AI or capitalism or what they do or how they affect the earth or how they affect humans or how they affect anything else within this tapestry. It's all to say that each of these systems, going back to clouds for a second, clouds run on their own set of rules. They produce their own behavior. They do their own thing. They're systems in their own right. Individuals are systems in their own right. Capitalism is a system in its own right. Each one of these things has a different amount of novelty that they produce, a different number of things that can come from their basic rule set, a different number of emergent behaviors, emergent properties. And I think the main takeaway from this video is to go and look at systems in their own right. Go look at them and take a causal perspective, say, how do they work? What makes them tick? And secondly, what can they do? What are their rules? What comes forth from them? What can they produce? Can they produce other subsystems? Can they produce systems that run on them in the case of capitalism? Or in the case of AI, running on the information that humans have previously produced? And then alongside that, or after that, you can take a broader perspective and say, how does this system impact other systems? And what systems do I care about? However, looking at something in its own right will give a much better perspective of the thing. If your goal is to build solid, reasoned perspectives on the world that you live in, then I think taking this approach will give a much more well-rounded view. Like I said, I find a tremendous element of beauty in all of this. I went to this bizarre local sellers fair in Portland, and it was inside of an old abandoned warehouse, and everyone had their own booth, and it was like a market was what it was marketed as, or something, I guess. However, every vendor there was just selling stuff that they had very clearly purchased off of like Alibaba or something. And so it was just framed prints of gorillas with neon glasses. I think half the stuff was like AI generated, half the prints were AI generated. It was a completely bizarre place, but I honestly loved being there. I think there's an element of beauty in all of it. There's so much complexity to the rules that had to be in place for any of that to be produced. None of this is meant to change your mind on anything. I'm not trying to make you pro-capitalist or pro-AI or even pro-library, pro-cloud. I don't care. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to say that taking a look at these things on their own terms, on their own ground, will give a much more well-rounded, holistic view of all of it once you do decide to compare the interacting elements of it. But anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. This was a different style, but was fun to make in front of an actual whiteboard this time. As far as my videos go, I don't know what my uploading schedule will be. I would like to upload more frequently. Between like school and socializing and doing hobbies, I've been painting and stuff. My time is pretty full already. I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things. As far as like YouTube members go, I cannot promise you anything. Please unsubscribe if you don't want to just straight up give me money. I don't blame you at all. I can't promise any amount of member exclusive posts or videos or anything. I've been lacking massively. Same thing goes for emails. I've gotten a couple of emails that I have not responded to. It has nothing to do with you or the contents of your email. I've kind of been swamped, and YouTube has fallen on my priority list. However, I would like to rank that back up a couple of notches and hopefully get back into the swing of things. But for now, I promise you nothing. I promise you absolutely zero. And if you'd like to give me money, go ahead. If you would like to send me an email, go ahead. However, there's no promise of reciprocation in any capacity. So with that being said, again, I thank you. I really do enjoy having people who watch my videos and interact with them. That's very gratifying. And yeah, I hope I'll see you relatively soon. I hope I'll produce more goop for you. All right. Well, bye.